Welcome, friends and fellow birders, to the first ever episode of 10 Birding Questions, the Birding with Bilbo podcast. I'm your host, Nate Bowler, author of the Birding with Bilbo Substack. We are here to meet and get to know birders of all stripes and from all corners. And one of those birders happens to be from my corner, and that is Frank Izaguirre. Listeners familiar with the American Birding Association are no doubt also familiar with Frank's work as editor of Birding, the ABA's wonderful magazine. Frank is also a Western Pennsylvania-based writer and birder, and I am extremely excited to welcome him as my first guest. Welcome, Frank, and thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here and to be the inaugural guest, so I'm really happy about that.
Great. Well, it's really great to see you, and let's just jump right in with the first question. Question I ask all my guests. What's your birding origin story? How did you get started?
My origin story, well, there's like a little bit of a backstory, and then I'll say what my spark bird was. When I was 12, my grandpa was sick, my dad's dad, and he loved watching nature, like wildlife documentaries. So my dad took him and like a lot of my extended family to Yellowstone on a big family trip. And I loved that trip a lot, and I really liked looking for all the animals, the big, charismatic megafauna, as they say, and smaller animals too. And I actually even like kept I never heard about like a checklist or anything like that, but I kept a list of the different animals I saw. So like bison, black bear, and elk, and things like that. But also like I saw some weasels, and I was like really looking for other kinds of animals that I wanted to see. And I did put some birds on that list, but I really wasn't that interested in the birds. And then when I came home because I grew up in Miami, when I came home to Miami, I was trying to find out if there was like similar animals that I could look for, but South Florida is not good for mammal watching. There's a few interesting things around, but it's pretty hard to see the ones that are around. It's just not. It's just different. But I learned that it was good for birds, and it was kind of a famous bird watching place. But at the time, I was kind of like, who cares? I mean, they're just birds. So I was like, so like disappointed in that. I was like, gotta get back to Yellowstone. But eventually, not that long after that, Spot-breasted Oriole came into my parents' front yard. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what's that? Because very, bright, beautiful bird. And I got my parents' Audubon field guide down off the shelf and looked it up, and I learned that it's a species that, as probably many listeners know, has a very small range in the United States, which is just like little parts of Miami, basically, because it's introduced there. And there's always been since it was introduced, there's been some around. But it's kind of like a specialty area. It's really it's a Mexican bird. And so that was kind of like interesting to me. And after that, I started like getting more into birding. And so that's the origin story.
Just out of curiosity, when you were on the Yellowstone trip, was the enthusiasm shared with the whole family, or was this a matter of you like really getting into it?
Yeah, really it was. On some level, it's exciting. I think almost anyone who goes to Yellowstone is going to be like, wow, look at the bison, like, oh, there's like a bear, But for the most part, it was me. It was like, and I wanted to go exploring a lot more than I was allowed to, because I was still pretty young, and I wanted to go on different walks and stuff, and I wanted to do more. I was really like chomping at the bit to like go and like try to find stuff. So really it was kind of a lot me.
Do you have a strong memory of that Oriole? Did it stick around for a while? How was it behaving?
No, I mean I kind of remember seeing it just in the tree outside my parents' house, kind of like right in front of the street, and it being there for a little while. And I guess I got a good enough look at it to feel pretty confident about. I think I must have gotten the field guide and taken it out and looked through the field guide until I figured out what it was. So I guess it did stick around for a while, but it is a little bit of like a fuzzy memory, and I've like told that story enough times that the memory becomes the story, or excuse me, the story becomes the memory. And so right. Whatever details I haven't fixated on. I'm rusty on, but I do remember being like really confident that that's what it was, and being like, oh, interesting. And I really didn't see them. I mean, my parents don't really live in the neighborhoods that typically get them, so I don't know what it was doing there. I mean, I haven't really seen them around there.
Wow, that's a very cool spark bird, though. Okay, when I found you on social media, I noticed the way that you celebrated other birders getting life birds. So why? What is it about seeing a bird for the first time that's so special and worth celebrating?
Well, it's kind of a hard question to answer in a way. I mean, what is it about, getting a life bird that is so special? What is it about it that is so addictive? I mean, that's like a core aspect of birding. When you like get a life bird and it's so exciting, and then eventually for a lot of birders it becomes like, oh, I want to get like a new county bird or a new patch bird, and then that becomes super exciting and thrilling, and or a new yard bird, or state, etc. There's like endless ways to do it, and I don't know. I think to answer your question about like what is it about, I think it makes us feel something. We like feel
Yes.
something in our bodies. Like
Yes.
it's like a very tangible thing. It's like it's like a sense. You just like, it makes you feel like excited. I mean, I remember like, I met Sandy Camito just by coincidence in South Florida when I was there, and my wife and I chased a Bahama mockingbird, and he was there, and he was so funny, man. Like, he was a hilarious guy. I asked him like, "Are you Sandy Camito?" And he was like, "How do people know?" And he was just such a funny guy, man. And anyway, like, we talked to him for a while, and he just said, I think he said, man, I don't know, I could be getting confused. Maybe he like said this in an interview or something, but he said that like when he would get a mega rarity, which is of course like a very extreme form of birding that's also fun, but not everyone, has the time and inclination to bird that way. But when he would chase a mega rarity, he would describe it as like, once you finally get the bird, you almost like, you like can't move. You're like overwhelmed with the feeling of it. And I don't know what it is about that. I think it's impossible to fully know like why birds do that to us, but it like feels good and it's addictive.
I completely agree. Like, it could be any bird, doesn't matter how drab or how spectacular. For the first time, something happens up here.
Yeah.
Whatever the pleasure centers, like the dopamine, whatever gets released, it's a real thing, and it's a real feeling. And personally, I love that feeling.
Yeah.
I think anybody would, and I love helping other people get that feeling. So I just got a real kick out of the way that when somebody announced a lifer on whatever platform, you shared it and celebrated with them.
Yeah, and that was a great thing about especially Twitter used to be like this. It was very easy to do because you just press a button and then it's like, you can amplify that for people. And I mean, I think sharing it is like an extension of that feeling. It like feels good to the person in the moment, and then it like feels good for them to post about it, and then it feels good to like amplify that on the internet, and other people can keep feeling good about it. And it's like something, it's like a shared feeling that it's like part of the birding community to like share that with everyone. And I think it's something that kind of binds birders a lot. And we do a version of that in the magazine. We have the celebrations column where people can submit, it used to be more people would just send in like their big milestones, but it doesn't have to be a milestone. It can be any kind of sighting. And so we kind of participate in that in a print version of it.
You answered that beautifully. It's exactly how I feel. So speaking of life birds, what's your latest lifer?
So since my daughter was born, I have not gotten a lot of life. I've gotten 2 life birds since she was born. One was white wagtail in Florida, which I went out of my way to try to see when I visited my parents one year. So that was a really cool one to get. And then the most recent one was I was in Chicago in April, and I went and got European goldfinch, which has like a little bit of a population there. I think it's more or less like between Chicago and Milwaukee, and maybe like a little bit in the interior. There's some European goldfinches around, but I had to try 3 times It was like not the easiest bird to get. But I just, looked around different places where people were seeing it, and I kept trying. But like, I was with my kid, and it was like a road trip, and it's a little tricky. But then the third time, which was the last time we were going to be able to try, it's always like that, It's like, one more. Oh my God, there it is. Well, it's not always like that, but it so often happens. It seems to happen that way. Finally, we got it the third time, and we actually saw. It was kind of cool because we pulled over in this place. And we got the goldfinch pretty fast, which was good because we didn't have a lot of time. But we got it right away. So it was like, and then my daughter saw a playground, and she was like, "I want to go to the playground." So she's 3, and so we went. It was like, okay, well, she's just gonna be crying the whole time if we get back on the road right away. So like, let's go to the playground for a few minutes. So we went to the playground for a few minutes, and then like another one came. It was like, oh, there's another goldfinch, another European goldfinch. Oh, neat. So yeah, that was. So I did get one lifer last year. Yeah, and that was it.
European goldfinch has a population. I guess I didn't know. Did they try to introduce that bird?
I don't remember exactly what the story is because I looked into that at some point. I think they may have just been some escapees that established themselves. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a good one.
Yeah, it was cool. It's cool.
Very cool. Very beautiful bird. How would you describe yourself as a birder? What's your approach? Do you like to take your time, take a picture? Do you like to hustle, get a big list, little this, a little of that?
Well, that is maybe like the hardest question you've asked me so far because it's a little difficult to know how to describe yourself. I would be interested in hearing how other people would think of me. I guess like I would say that I can toggle between those modes. But really, probably my default mode, especially these days, is just kind of like slow and taking a lot of photos of not necessarily birds, but it's kind of a while ago now, but maybe starting in like 2017, I got really into iNaturalist. I had field guides of bugs and plants, and I would try to learn some stuff, but iNaturalist was such a great tool for learning more about plants, really learning the bugs. And so I would take photos of like everything, like as much as I could, and upload it to iNaturalist. And I was just amazed at how many experts there were on there who would ID it for me or correct me or whatever. And so I really got hooked on that. And so that affected the way I bird a lot. I mean, I was always kind of like that, interested in things other than birds. But now, like, I really will like be looking around and trying to find other things. So I can be very slow on the trail. But I mean, I don't have to. I could go faster, like if I'm with someone and they really, they want a certain bird or something, I will be happy to like focus on that bird, or they want to just like get as big a bird checklist as possible. Like I can run and gun and do that kind of thing too. If there are lifers at stake, I'll be like a little bit more focused on that. So next time I do like a real birding trip, then I'll be happy. I'll switch into that mode more. But I would describe myself as kind of like slow and like taking the phone out a lot, and not even the telephoto lens. I mean, I used to always have to I don't even like bird with a telephoto lens anymore, which is a little bit nerve-wracking. Like, what if I do find a rarity and I need to take a photo? But I just like half the time I'm like carrying my kid around, and it's just too heavy, like it's too heavy. I don't even like, sometimes I don't even go with the pins anymore. I just kind of like go and listen.
Take it in by ear. And
I'll take, which sometimes it's a good time of year for that, and sometimes it's not. Taking my little girl around and sometimes take photos of the bugs and stuff, which is easier and more reasonable. I mean, there was like a thing that happened, I guess it was 2 springs ago now, is that there was, northern water thrushes pass through here, and it's one of those birds, it's like, it trips the filter on eBird, but it's like, I don't know, like, maybe it shouldn't, but it does. And so it's like rare, but it's not really that rare.
Seems like it's annual here.
Oh yeah, they come through. I mean, it's a short window. But anyway, so like I was in Shenley, which is my main patch, or one of my main, Shenley Park, which is one of my main patches, really close to our house. And I I was pretty sure I had a northern water thrush. It was water thrush. It looked like northern water thrush, but it was kind of not exactly where I would expect to see one. And I had my daughter with me, and we were like up on this trail that's like at the top of the hollow. And she was like, could walk, but like barely, not very well. And so it's like, it was so stressful because I felt like I owed it to other birders, like make sure that it really was the northern water thrush and report it, so most people aren't going to come look at that, but I knew like maybe one or two people would come look at it, and it's like if I mess it up, then it's going to be a really embarrassing miss ID, But I couldn't really like put her down because I thought she was gonna like fall off the trail, and it's like, well, I have to be like a responsible parent, but I would try to like hold the bins with one arm while holding her, and like eventually I got like good clear looks at it, and I was like, okay, it's definitely a northern water thrush, but it was like surprisingly like stressful and annoying situation. So like sometimes I don't even go with the bins, just kind of walk around and.
Birding with kids is a challenge. I had to just give it up for a while. I didn't give up the kids, I gave up the birding.
I understand.
You edit my favorite birding magazine, Birding. Tell me about your path to bird journalism.
Sure. So my main plan was to go into academia. And that's what I was like mostly preparing myself for and building toward. However, I am like, I have humanities degrees, and, academia has been difficult to job market, especially for the humanities. So I kind of like hedged a little bit. I also like really just kind of wanted to be a writer. That was very important to me and still is. So I was kind of like pursuing these paths that were like more or less like parallel or like overlapping in some way. So I was trying to write and publish in different places, which could be good for an academic career. It could be good, to be like a freelancer, or, the path that I ended up having, which is to be, an editor and bird journalism as you described it. And so I would try to write for different like bird magazines, bird publications, and I started having a lot of luck with Birding in particular. It wasn't the only place that I wrote for, but I really started having some success there. So it was kind of like my hedge as I was like finishing my PhD program. Well, like, I'm kind of like working more closely with this organization that I like, the ABA, and that's where the opportunities opened up. And there were, different factors, like my wife and I've lived in Pittsburgh most of my adult life, and I kind of wanted to be here and, to go on the academic job market, to even have like a chance, you really have to be able to go almost anywhere.
Absolutely.
And be willing to do that. And I didn't really want to do that. So this ended up being a good path for me. More specifically, how I got into this role, I made a pitch. Well, actually, the first thing I did is I wrote for the ABA's blog, just like as a volunteer. And I wrote for the blog, then eventually I was able to I pitched some stories for the magazine, and I wrote for the magazine. Then eventually the book reviews editor, who runs like the column of the book reviews and book and media reviews, his name was Rick Wright. He stepped down. He did it for a long time, I think about 9 or 10 years. And I was invited to fill that role. So that's when I started like becoming more involved with the magazine. And then Ted Floyd, who's the longtime editor, pursued some other opportunities, and so he went half-time, and so that's when I was able to basically like fill the other half of his role as the editor of the magazine alongside him, and also Michael Redder, who does the special issues. So that's really more specifically how I got to where I am.
So is it kind of a smooth transition from contributing to full-time job?
Well, it's not full-time, but yes, there was like an escalation of responsibilities, and I just did more and more. There was also, like I didn't mention, there was like a program in my PhD where it was like a summer program where you could like pitch an internship, and if you like, where the program, like the department, would fund you for the summer to do an internship that otherwise would have been unpaid. And so I mentioned that to Ted, and originally my idea was to do something different with him. But he was like, "Why don't you be an intern for the magazine?" And I was like, "Well, that sounds great to me." And so I was able to make that pitch, and I was awarded that fellowship. So I was the intern for the magazine. And so that was like another stepping stone and just like becoming more involved in the magazine and really getting to know it. And I liked all that work. And I guess they thought I was good enough at it. So
Well, the magazine's so well put together and obviously crafted with such love and care that I just naturally assumed it was a full-time job.
yeah, thanks. Well, in some ways it is. But I mean, I make 3 issues and Ted makes 3 issues, and then Michael does 2 special issues.
Okay, understood. I've noticed Birding has articles in English with a Spanish translation, sort of side by side, particularly when covering stories in Spanish-speaking countries. As a native Spanish speaker, is broadening the magazine's audience through language something you're working toward?
So the answer to that question is probably like a little more complicated than you might expect. On the most basic level, yes, of course, we want the magazine to have as broad an audience, including native Spanish speakers, as possible. But specifically with that example that you gave, those are not issues that I edited. Those are ones that I think Michael is the one who has done all of those. So that was kind of his idea. So I can't take credit for doing that. And it's also not necessarily how I would or how I have approached that sort of thing. What I have done in the magazine really several times now is I have worked with a contributor who I gave the option, you can write this article in English or Spanish, and if you write it in Spanish, I'll translate it for the magazine. And so like the person I've done it with at least 3 people, but the person I've done it with the most is Chucho Mo Jam. He was very gung-ho about writing for ABA, and so he wrote so much that I gave him like a column and I gave him a title. He's the Latin American correspondent. And so he would write his articles in Spanish and then I would translate them. And I've had a few times I've had people who requested the article be published as like on our website too in HTML. And what we've done, not always, but sometimes then, is publish it in English and Spanish. So the translation is not in the print magazine, or in the PDF version of the magazine for e-members, but it is on the website in Spanish, and so you can like toggle quickly between that. Now, I think that would be a good thing to do more of. I think we could possibly attract some interest in the organization if we did that really uniformly. Like, I mean, what I think would be great is if everything we put on the website could be easily toggled between Spanish and how about Portuguese? How about French? Like I have an article coming up that is in part it's going to be about the neomorphous ground cuckoos, which most of those, I think all of those species they used to be almost impossible to find in Latin America, but now there's been like some developments where there's a few guides who are like really, really good at finding these really hard birds. And so I'm gonna have Peter Kasner write about that. I haven't said that to anybody, by the way. That's like an exclusive for the podcast. Well, I mean, I've said it internally, but that's maybe going to be in the September issue. And so that would be like, a lot of that stuff has been happening in the Amazon. And so I think it would be great to have that on the website and have it available in Portuguese. Like, I don't even know, you want the grammar to be as good as possible, but like maybe it doesn't matter that much. If someone tells you like they find a mistake, it's more important, I think, for it to be accessible. I mean, I think that would be great, but we have to have, like, at ABA, we have to have, like, the capacity to do that. It does add, like, a certain level of work, even if it's, like, somewhat automated. And so I've kind of, like, done it by request or as a volunteer. I mean, the other aspect of it is, like, especially working with Chucho is a really good example of this. The main reason I have been willing to translate his work is because, I mean, there are a few reasons, but it's because it gives me a greater talent pool to draw from for the magazine. Like, if I can work with someone who is more comfortable writing or telling their story or whatever they have to say about birding, that I think is good content for the magazine in Spanish, then there's more people that I can draw from to contribute to the magazine and make a really high quality product so that the members can enjoy the magazine and like learn stuff and just, like it. So that's more what I'm thinking about. There's so many Latinos both in the US and in Latin America that are already like crazy about birding. Like those communities are exploding. So I think it's good to reach them, but at the same time, like a lot of those birders are like really fluent in English already. I don't know to what extent they even need translations, but it would still be good to have them. I don't know. So that was a lot of, that was like, I said it was going to be a complicated answer.
And you delivered. And you gave us some insider information as well. So thanks for that. Like me, you're based in Western Pennsylvania, which may not be seen as the sexiest location for birding by the general birding public. But how would you sell Western PA as a birding destination?
Well, I mean, I think Western PA, if I was going to sell it as you described it, it's just a very beautiful area. It's just a very beautiful place. And in Pittsburgh is a really nice city. But it's like you drive like as little as like 10, 15 minutes and you're like, really, it can be in a really woodsy area. And so that's kind of nice for birding. There are just a lot of really beautiful places in Western Pennsylvania. Those like green, mossy, like damp, almost like glowing green forests that are really close to Pittsburgh. And you asked about Western Pennsylvania. So if you're thinking about all of Western Pennsylvania, Presque Isle is a top tier birding spot, in my opinion. I haven't been there in a few years, but just, the whole like advocate thing. But I used to go there for a while. Like I would go like pretty frequently. It's really great. It's like, I mean, I would put Presque. It's right there with like Northern Ohio. I haven't been to Tawas, but I mean Point Pelee I haven't been to either. But Presque is like, it's just a great migrant trap. It's really great in all seasons. When it gets cold, that's an awesome place to go birding. I mean, it's cold, but I mean it's a great place to look for gulls and whatever else, finches, snowy owls some years, and like up there, like a little. Like it's like 2 hours north of Pittsburgh. There's really good birding there. I think it's the best birding in the state. So that's how I would sell Western PA, I guess.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say I haven't been there. I haven't lived here that long, but it's definitely it needs to happen maybe next winter.
It's nice, and it's great. Like I said, in all seasons. Yeah, we have some specialties around here. It's not the best place to look for cerulean warbler or Henslow's sparrow, but a lot of people need that, especially if you're from the West or something. And this is a nice place to, I think, come in and try to get those birds. Maybe whippoorwill for some people, American woodcock for some people. So
yeah, coming from Central Michigan, that was a previous stop. Some of the warblers have been a nice bonus here, the cerulean and the worm eating. Much harder to get where I came from. And maybe even Swainson's starting to show up once in a while.
Yeah, that's one that I always kind of daydream about, finding in the patch in spring. So, we'll see. I did have someone, a birder friend, visit from Boston, and I asked him what he wanted to see, and the way he described it was he wanted to see like the in quotes, like southern warblers that he doesn't really get up there. And I was like, oh, yeah, we have those and you don't have those. That's true. So, yeah.
The ABA has so many benefits for birders, but it's not just a club for birders. Can you tell us about the ABA's work in making a positive impact on birds and conservation?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for saying that, first of all. I think probably in terms of conservation, it is kind of an interesting question, like to what extent should Birding Magazine be about conservation? And it's something I think a lot about as an editor, because there are other publications that their editorial focus is more explicitly on conservation and even bird conservation. So for birding is not unrelated. I mean, clearly, that's something that matters to birders and to birding, but you don't want to like stray too much from your niche, because then you're sort of like not as well equipped to be like on that focus. So what I try to do is I do run some articles that are more about conservation, but I always try to make sure that they are about how conservation directly affects birding. And sometimes I really need to sort of like guide the author in how to do that and be involved in that process. However, that's just, that's the magazine. And I think our executive director, Wayne Klockner, is like, he has a conservation background because most of his career was he worked for the Nature Conservancy, and that was really like he did that for decades. So I think he wants to lean a little bit in that direction, and I think there's wisdom in that. But probably to answer your question, like what does ABA do the most for conservation? Probably the most robust aspect of our conservation involvement is the Young Birder program, because we mentor all these young birders, and then that can help them to be involved in conservation initiatives from a young age. A lot of them go into that as a career. It can really give them a leg up in that. That program has been around for somewhat like kind of a long time now, and some of those the alumni of the program have gone on to have conservation careers, or maybe conservation adjacent careers. So that's a really big impact. We have the Birds Exchange program. Sometimes ABA is able to like facilitate partnerships between groups in Latin America who need access to resources because they're doing important conservation work, but they don't have the resources. So that's another sort of like conservation initiative. So those I think are some of the main ways.
Yeah, no, that strikes me as an effective tactic, is to raise generations of conservation-minded young people. And the Young Birder program just seems like a great experience altogether.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like, I mean, when I think about how I was when I was that age, I did not have friends who were into that stuff at all. And so what I would do is I would like get into birding a little bit and like meet some of my goals and like do it a little bit. But then I would want to have friends that were my age and like be social. And so I would do the kind of things that my friends like to do. And then I would sort of be like, I want to like go birding again. And like, so I would do that, but I'd kind of be alone, or like, I could do some stuff with older people that were in the Audubon group, the local Audubon group. But a lot of times I just kind of did it alone. But with the Young Birder program, a lot of these young kids can just connect with people who are their own age, and from different parts of the country. So that's a really great service that didn't used to exist before. And so I do think it helps a lot of those kids feel connected to that stuff and learn about it at a younger age and know what the options are for them if they want to have that kind of career. Or maybe they decide they don't want to have that kind of career, but they want it to be like a big avocation. And so it's just good for them to like know and like have people to talk to and connect to.
Yeah, it's just kind of the downside of some of these nerdy hobbies is that it's difficult to connect with people with shared interest.
Yeah, although, I think that's gotten easier. It has gotten easier, but I feel like birding is not as nerdy as it used to be. The perception of it is more like that it's like kind of cool now. Maybe that's even like peaked a little bit and is going a little bit away. But I remember there was like this real trend where it's like, it felt like, I don't know how true this is. I mean, I could be wrong. I felt like a lot of hipsters were like getting into bird watching, just like, I don't know, it was like countercultural or something. And it's all of a sudden that it became like kind of mainstream and not nerdy. So I don't know. I mean, is birding nerdy or not? It is, but it also isn't. I don't know. That's kind of an interesting conversation to have.
Just how nerdy is birding at a given time?
Yeah. I guess it depends on the given birder / nerd.
This is a big question we don't have too much time for, but I was fascinated. You recently completed a PhD PhD in English literature, and your scholarship focuses on the genre of field guides and how they've influenced the human relationship with the natural world. Can you tell us how? I think, for me, when I think of a field guide, I think of it as like a key to sort of beginning to understand this complex, confusing world, like for me, for birds, but there's like rocks and bugs and all kinds of things. So there's all kinds of field guides for all kinds of things. So talk a little bit about that.
I did. I did write an entire dissertation on it, and it is one of those topics that like I thought about so much and wrote about so much. The way I framed the entire project was I asked, what do field guides do? And I just tried to go from there. I tried to think of it as like in as broad a sense as possible. And I do think one of the answers to that question, you already sort of like provided it when you were talking about how you think of field guides and how they influence you. I mean, it's like it's a genre of book that people put on their bookshelves and they look through it and it propels them outside because they think, okay, I can understand these different elements of the natural world, of the living world, and distinguish them, and arranging them in such a way that they're like separate from each other and distinguishable. It sort of like creates a certain element of desire, and so for a lot of people it makes you want to try to find those different kinds of organisms or non-living entities too. Like you mentioned, rocks, minerals. I mean, there's field guides for like everything. There's like so many different kinds of field guides. There's satirical field guides. There's like a field guide to hot sauces. Like I really went through this in the project as well. And so like it kind of like that's one thing that they do. They kind of like push us outside and like get us looking at these things. But they also really influence the way we think about nature, because we think about nature through field guides. So like species as a concept. Okay, that's like an idea that a guy had, Linnaeus, and that concept like spread and became like, so to speak, sort of like professionalized, and it was like part of science, and there eventually people were able to have careers based on this like idea of the species concept is like a very flawed concept. There's so many problems with the idea of species. Scientists like struggle with how to even define species and subspecies and all these different taxonomic orders, because it's happened so often that like species interbreed, but like the whole point of a species is that they breed with themselves, so it's kind of a deeply flawed concept, and most experts would say that and understand that, but it's an idea that was created at a certain time. It like spread around the world, and you have this genre of book, field guides. There's like people talk about species in a lot of different contexts and a lot of different types of books, but field guides specifically very often focus on the idea of species, and so field guides have propelled this scientific concept around the world, and so now like all these people around the world think of nature and everything all the living things that we're surrounded by as species, in large part because of field guides. So they're very influential genre. And the way, there's just a lot of things to say about field guides. I mean, one of the things that I sort of like talk about in the dissertation is that if you look at the way a lot of field guides are structured, they're somewhat comparable to the way like consumer catalogs are structured, and so they create like an element of desire, and they sort of like, it's like a different, people sort of think of field guides as like an antidote to consumerism, but there is a consumer element to the way field guides make us think about living things and non-living things. So I mean, there's a lot of topics that I explore like that. They also, like, a lot of times field guides are structured. They're not always. There are exceptions to this, but they're usually not structured as like using like a biogeography or focusing on a specific type of ecology or habitat or something. Usually they're organized by geopolitical boundaries, and so we think about we a lot of times we think about nature and wildlife and stuff like that through these sort of like national frameworks or these other sort of political boundaries, and in large part that's because of field guides. So it's a fun project. It was a lot of work. It took me a while to finish, and there was more I wanted to do, but at some point I needed to just be like, okay, maybe you can do more on this in the future, and you can like expand on it a bit and write a book about it or something, but you gotta like finish it up. And I was able to do that. So
Right. Gotta wrap up the degree. That's very interesting, and it's going to give me a lot to think about. I definitely have not thought about field guides in that kind of depth. Just out of curiosity, did you have any trouble kind of selling a committee on that subject, or on the study of field guides?
yeah, that's a good question. I honestly did not have trouble with that. I think people were pretty excited about that project. Field guides were good because they were a good choice. When I decided to do the PhD, that was not my idea of what I had an idea for what I wanted to do the dissertation on. But I mean, I had a few ideas, but like my main idea was I went through like a time where, and I still am interested in this, but I was very interested in the way people wrote about different authors wrote about the rainforest, especially neotropical rainforest, and how like the way and how it changed over time, and how different kinds of authors would write about it, and how that developed the perception of the rainforest. And so I wasn't really aware of a lot of scholarship about that, and so I wanted to do a dissertation on that. That was my idea. But eventually I like did a field guide project for one of my classes, and that happened to be the professor of that class he became my chair. So he knew I was interested in that, and he really liked my project. So he would he retired now, but he would like use it as an example for how to do that assignment, which was like super flattering, because he was like a respected figure within the department and within the field in general. So that was really cool. And so he was my chair. So like, as long as he was good with it. And also like there are some other scholars who have written about field guides. So there was like an existing body of work already, but there was like still a lot that could be said. So it was like kind of good because there was like stuff that I could build off of, but it was still like there was a lot remaining to kind of like explore. So it was kind of easy to sell it from that angle. So I didn't get, it is true, like a lot of times, I don't know, English is kind of an interesting discipline in that sense when you get to like that, grad school level and like deep research, because it's like, they say that you can like, anything can be a text, you can analyze anything. But at the end of the day, like, it's like, why aren't you writing about a novel or like poetry or something? So, or like maybe nonfiction. So it was a little bit unconventional in that sense, but people were excited about it, and they thought it was like a good combination of like innovative, but also like using the classic approach and appropriate for the discipline.
Possibly a welcome change from the other areas that are so saturated with scholarship. All right, we're coming to it. Number 10, I call it the dreaded question. I ask all my guests. Frank Izaguirre, what is your favorite bird?
It's not a dreaded question for me. I like the Golden-winged Warbler a lot. I'll cite that as my favorite bird. I've had some other birds in the past that I was like, oh, that's my favorite bird. But Golden-winged Warbler has been a really special bird for me, and it's always, I've written about this a little bit in some places, but it always has surprised me. The first time I went to go see one, it was like one of the last Eastern warblers that I didn't. It wasn't the last one, but it was like maybe second to last that I hadn't seen a golden-winged warbler. And I went to Scotia Barrens, which is a place where they breed in central PA, because like they've like retreated, the breeding habitat is like diminished, and at least around here. So I went to Scotia Barrens, which is like kind of a stronghold, and I looked a lot and didn't get it. And then finally at the end of the day I heard one, but the blue wings can make their song, so I really needed to see it and to make sure. And then I saw it, and it was a beautiful male, and I had this really like kind of shocking experience where it was like along a trail, and there was like kind of like a like kind of like hedges, and the bird just kept coming closer and closer to me, which is not usually how they behave. And it just kept coming closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. And I was getting these like amazing photos with my telephoto lens until it was like right next to me almost, and I couldn't really figure out what was going on, but I got great photos. And then I started walking away, and I was looking at the viewfinder on my camera at the bird, and I realized the reason it had been coming closer to me is because it was feeding a recently fledged chick, and I hadn't even seen the chick because it was just like camouflaged in the hedge, but it was like feeding the chick a couple caterpillars. And so then I went back and I like found the chick, and it was even crazier because I saw the mate, the mate too, which was nearby, and it was a Brewster's, and female Brewster's. And so like the chick, maybe it could have been, back crosses, it could have been Lawrence's. So that was like just a really shocking and very cool encounter, and it was my life for Brewster's too. So that was all very neat. And then I had another experience where I don't know if you know this about me. I've written about this or said it in a few places, but I have had cancer various times, and so there was one time when I had cancer in 2014. I was receiving chemotherapy, and I had moved back in with my parents, which was a very difficult thing at that time, and so my mom, I was on chemotherapy, and I was just feeling like really awful. And my mom like came to my room and said, "Frank, there's an Oriole outside." And I knew it wasn't an Oriole. I knew it was going to be an American redstart. But I like went out anyway, and I was really not happy about it. I was just like kind of curled in my bed, like in the dark. But I came outside, and it was an American redstart. But there was a mixed flock, so I was like, all right, I'm out here. Let me see what's in the mixed flock. And I like pitched it in, and one of them was a Golden-winged Warbler, and that's a really good bird for South Florida. That's like they pass through there, but that's kind of one of the harder, more regular warblers to get down there. And so that was very exciting and memorable and made me feel better. So that was very cool. And when I went on honeymoon with my wife in Costa Rica, we had a Golden-winged Warbler on the first full day that we were there, and it was cool because it was like, we were like in the rainforest, and I was like, oh, what's that thing? And I thought it was gonna be some like tarantula or something that was like really hard to identify. Like, all right, let's see if I can figure this out. But this is a Golden-winged Warbler because they were migrating through. So it's a species that has always like surprised me, and it just, so that's my favorite bird.
That's a great answer. And there is something about Golden-winged Warbler. It's a little extra among warblers. It's always a little special to see one. I don't have any stories that special, especially numerous stories about special encounters. So thank you for sharing those. Those are really great stories. All right, that takes care of our 10 birding questions, I think. Frank Izaguirre is a fantastic birder, writer, and editor of Birding, the American Birding Association's bi-monthly magazine. If you're interested in joining the ABA and getting something delightful delivered to your mailbox, I encourage you to visit aba.org to explore their various membership options. Birding, the magazine, is full of bird knowledge and bird photography and so much more, and I promise it's the perfect companion to your birding life. Check it out if you haven't already. Frank, it's been a real joy and an honor to have you on 10 Birding Questions. Thank you so much for being my first guest. It really means a lot, you taking this time out to spend with me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was great fun.
Well, you take care, and maybe I'll see you out there sometime.
Okay, that'd be great. See ya. Have a great day.
10 Birding Questions is a Birding with Bilbo production. Hosted and produced by Nate Bowler. Alexandra Hidalgo is our associate producer. Original theme music by Alejandro Zavala. If you wish to support my work at Birding with Bilbo, consider becoming a subscriber of my Substack at bilbobaggins.substack.com, and that's Bilbo with 2 L's. Of course, the best way to support me is to become a paid subscriber, which comes with bonus written, photographic, and podcast content like this.
And I kept my eyes open for as long as I could, just to like, look at this magnificent bird that was so rare.
As always, 5% of earnings are donated to the American Birding Association. That's all for this month. Until next time, Thanks for listening, and don't forget to bird your ass off.